At my mother's 80th birthday dinner, my new stepdaughter raised her glass and called me Dad's retirement plan. When I asked her to apologize, my husband laughed and said, "She's not your daughter, Evie. Don't correct her." That was the moment something inside me went very still. Not broken, not angry exactly, still. We were sitting in a private room at the Oakwood Chop House in Carmel, Indiana. I had spent 3 weeks arranging that dinner for my mother, Linda. I called twice to make sure the entrance was easy for her walker, asked for a chair with firm support, and brought a small cushion from home because her new knee still stiffened if she sat too long. The restaurant had soft yellow lighting, dark wood walls, and white tablecloths that made everybody sit a little straighter. My sister Carol had brought a bouquet of pink roses. My son Daniel had driven over from Fisher's after work, still wearing the clean navy polo he kept in his truck for family events. It should have been a good night. Grant's daughter Madison arrived 40 minutes late. She swept into the room wearing a cream-colored coat I had helped pay for at Christmas and carrying a handbag that cost more than my first washing machine. She kissed her father on the cheek, gave my mother a quick little wave, and said, "Sorry, parking was insane." Parking was not insane. The lot had been half empty when she walked in. But I said nothing. I was trying very hard in those days to be what people called a good stepmother. Madison was 21, a junior at Northgate University, and according to Grant, she had struggled after her parents' divorce. I told myself patience was part of blending a family. So I paid for things. At first, it was small, a phone bill, a dental copay, a few $100s for textbooks. Then came tuition installments, sorority dues, car insurance, the Jeep payment, and a monthly allowance Grant said would help Madison focus on school. "You're giving her a real chance," he used to tell me. I liked hearing that. After 12 years as a widow, it felt good to believe I was building something again. Dinner went smoothly for maybe 20 minutes. My mother told a story about getting pulled over in 1968 while driving my father's Plymouth without a license. Daniel teased her about being a criminal. Even Grant laughed. Then Daniel asked Madison how her business classes were going. Madison glanced up from her phone. "They're fine. College is pretty easy when Dad marries a woman who loves spreadsheets and automatic payments." Daniel stopped smiling. Carol lowered her water glass slowly. Grant gave a short laugh, the kind people use when they want everyone else to accept that something cruel was only a joke. I looked at Madison. "What does that mean?" She shrugged. "Nothing. I'm saying you're organized." "That isn't what you said." "Oh, come on, Evie." My mother shifted in her chair. She was trying not to make a scene on her own birthday, which made me even angrier. Then Madison lifted her wine glass. "To Dad," she said. "He finally found a retirement plan with excellent credit." No one laughed that time. I could hear silverware touching plates in the main dining room outside. Somewhere near the kitchen, a waiter dropped something metal. I put down my fork. "Madison, apologize." Her eyebrows rose. "For what?" "For insulting me in front of my family, and for doing it at my mother's birthday dinner." She looked at Grant. That was when he placed his hand over my wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, just hard enough to stop me from moving. "She's not your daughter, Evie," he said. "Don't correct her." He said it loudly. That was the part I remembered later, not only the words, but the volume. He wanted everyone at that table to understand where I stood. I looked down at his hand covering mine. My fingers were already aching from the cold weather, and the pressure made the joints throb. "Take your hand off me," I said. He did, but rolled his eyes. "You're turning a joke into a family crisis." Madison leaned back in her chair, satisfied. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I wish I could tell you I'd delivered some brilliant response right there. I didn't. My face was hot, and my thoughts were stumbling over each other. Then I looked at my mother. She wasn't embarrassed by me. She was worried for me. That helped. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. "All right," I said. "Then I won't be expected to support her like one." Grant laughed again. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not being ridiculous." Madison shook her head and picked up her phone, as if I had become boring. The rest of the dinner was stiff and miserable. My mother opened her gifts. We sang happy birthday. Carol cut the cake while Grant talked too loudly about the weather. I paid the final bill because my card was already on file. On the drive home, Grant waited until we were past the third roundabout before starting. "You embarrassed me tonight." I stared through the windshield. "I embarrassed you? You challenged my daughter in front of everyone. She insulted me. She made a joke. And you told me I had no place correcting her. You don't, not like that." I turned toward him. "But I do have a place paying her bills?" He tightened both hands around the steering wheel. "Let's not punish a kid over one stupid comment. She's 21. She's still in school." There it was, the shift from independent adult to helpless child, depending on who owed whom an apology. Grant exhaled sharply. "Her tuition payment is due Friday. Don't do anything emotional." I looked back out the window. She became a kid again the moment a bill was due. That shut him up for the rest of the drive. The next morning, I woke at 5:38 with my lower back burning. I made coffee, pressed a heating pad behind me, and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. At 6:12, I pulled up 22 months of bank statements. I had always kept good records. Payroll work teaches you that numbers may be boring, but they are rarely confused. The list was worse than I expected. Tuition, Jeep payment, insurance, $900 a month for living expenses, phone service, sorority dues, dental bills, a study abroad deposit. Then I saw several transfers marked MH education, nearly $30,000. But the recipient wasn't Northgate University. The money had gone into an account connected to Grant's real estate business. My hand rested over the computer mouse. For a moment, I nearly closed the page. I remembered Grant sitting beside me on the anniversary of my first husband's death. I remembered him making dinner when my sciatica was bad. I remembered how relieved I had felt to be loved again. Then I remembered his hand over my wrist. I canceled the future payments I legally controlled. I removed Madison as an authorized user on my credit card. I stopped the allowance. I ended the automatic Jeep payment. I redirected my consulting income into an account Grant could not access. I did not take her car. I did not call the school. I simply stopped volunteering my money. At 7:03, Grant came into the kitchen holding his phone. "What the hell did you do?" I turned the laptop toward him and spread the printed statements across the table. "I followed your boundary," I said. "She isn't my daughter. You're her father." His anger lasted about 5 seconds. Then his eyes landed on the transfers. The color left his face. I tapped the page with one finger. "Why did nearly $30,000 marked for Madison's education go into your business account?" Grant reached across the table and tried to grab the statements. I pulled them back. And that was when I knew the insult at dinner was no longer the biggest problem in my marriage. Grant's hand stopped halfway across the table. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he sat back and gave me the expression I had seen him use with nervous clients, the calm, slightly disappointed look of a man explaining something obvious to someone who had failed to understand. "That is not my business account," he said. I turned the statement around and pointed to the name. Holloway Commercial Holdings. "It's an operating account." "For your business?" "It's more complicated than that." Of course it was. According to Grant, anything involving his money was complicated. Anything involving mine was family. He pulled out the chair across from me and lowered his voice. "I moved the tuition money into an education reserve so I could manage the deadlines." "Then show me the reserve." "I don't have access to everything from my phone." "You have your laptop upstairs." His jaw tightened. "Evie, I am not going to be interrogated in my own kitchen. It's my kitchen, too." That landed harder than I intended. His eyes flicked toward the cabinets, the hardwood floor, the breakfast nook I had renovated 6 years before meeting him. The house had belonged to me long before Grant did. He stood. "You're making a serious mistake." "No," I said. "I'm finally reading the statements." He left without breakfast. At 10:17 that morning, Madison called. I was in my office reconciling payroll for a dental practice when her name appeared on my phone. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered. "My card isn't working." No hello, no question about my mother, just the card. I know. There was a pause. What do you mean, you know? I removed you as an authorized user. Why? I leaned back in my chair and felt the familiar pinch run down my right leg. Because your father made it clear I'm not your parent. That has nothing to do with my card. It has everything to do with my card. She lowered her voice, probably because she was standing near other people. I'm at Cedar Grove Outlet. I already bought lunch, and now I can't pay for the clothes. Then don't buy them. You can't just do this without warning. I warned you last night. You were being dramatic, and now I'm being clear. She hung up on me. By noon, she had posted something online about older women who used money to control younger women. She did not mention my name, but she did not need to. Grant's sister, Denise, called 20 minutes later. I just saw Madison's post. What is going on? I stopped paying some of her expenses. Denise made a shocked sound. Evie, you can't pretend to be family and then abandon a child because she hurt your feelings. She is 21. She is still in college. She has a father and a mother. You know Marlene can't afford tuition. Then Grant will have to. The silence on the other end told me Denise knew something I did not. Grant has had a rough year, she said carefully. So have I. That's different. You've always been good with money. I nearly laughed. That seemed to be the family's entire financial philosophy. Evie was good with money, so Evie could absorb whatever everyone else had done with theirs. After we hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen. I had expected anger from Grant and Madison. I had not expected the immediate chorus of relatives telling me I was cruel. For 10 minutes, I considered restoring the tuition transfer. Then Daniel called. Grandma told me what happened. I sighed. She shouldn't have involved you. She didn't. Aunt Carol did. That sounds right. He hesitated. Are you okay? I'm fine. You don't sound fine. I rubbed my forehead. I may have overreacted. No, you didn't. You weren't there for the conversation this morning. I was there last night. His certainty irritated me. Try not to sound so pleased. I'm not pleased. You warned me about Grant from the beginning. I'm sure this is very satisfying. Daniel went quiet. That's not fair, Mom. I knew it the moment I said it, but pride kept me from apologizing. He ended the call a minute later. By 3 o'clock, I had managed to hurt the one person who was actually trying to help me. The next morning, I met with Tina Wallace at my bank near Keystone Parkway. Tina had helped me open my business account 11 years earlier. She wore reading glasses on a silver chain and remembered every client's children. She could not tell me anything about Grant's private accounts. She did, however, help me review transactions from the accounts that belonged to me. We went through 22 months, line by line. The total made my stomach drop, $84,000. Some of it had gone where Grant said it would. Northgate University, the Jeep lender, Madison's phone company. But several transfers went to his brokerage business, a commercial loan servicer, and an account marked only with the initials MB. I thought about the furnace repairman who had told me the heat exchanger might not last another winter. Grant had said we should wait. Madison's education came first. I thought about the physical therapy sessions I canceled because the copay felt wasteful. Madison's education came first. I thought about Grant's new Lexus parked in our garage. Tina closed the folder gently. You need an attorney. That afternoon, Grant discovered the premium cable package had been canceled. He marched into the kitchen holding the remote. Did you do this too? Yes. I was watching that. You can watch basic cable. This is childish. 2 days later, I stood behind him at Market District while he argued with a cashier because an 87-cent digital coupon would not load. The cashier looked exhausted. Grant kept tapping his phone. It says it's valid. Grant, I said, let it go. It's the principle. Outside, I looked at him over the grocery cart. You never checked prices when the money came from my account. That's not the same thing. No, I said. Apparently it was easier. That evening, Madison came to the house with a friend waiting in the driveway. I need the Jeep keys. I don't have them. You stopped the payments. The Jeep is titled to your father. She turned toward Grant. He was standing near the hallway, pretending to read an email. Dad? He cleared his throat. The vehicle may need to be returned temporarily. Madison stared at him. You said Evie had enough money to cover everything until graduation. The room went still. Grant's face hardened. Go wait in the car. No, you said she agreed. I looked at Madison. I agreed to help based on what I was told. You chose to pay, she shot back. Yes, I said. And now I'm choosing to stop. She left angry, but not before looking at her father in a way she never had before. That night, Grant sent me 6 text messages from the guest room. You are destroying this family. You are humiliating Madison. You have no idea what my business requires. I finally typed back, you stole from me, lied to your daughter, and used my dead husband's money to impress people. The next morning, attorney Nathan Kim read the message and shook his head. Do not argue with him in writing again. He deserved worse. I'm sure he did. But every angry sentence can be printed without the 10 lies that came before it. Nathan helped me freeze my credit and review my financial records. That was when we found the request to add Grant as a joint owner to one of my investment accounts. The company had rejected it because the signature did not match. Nathan placed the form beside an older document I had actually signed. The good news is no money moved, he said. Then he pointed to a handwritten note at the bottom. The bad news is whoever submitted this knew the exact value of the account. Only 2 people had seen that statement. Me and my husband. I drove home from Nathan's office with the radio off. Normally I liked having something on in the car. Old country music, local news, even commercials gave my mind something else to hold on to. That afternoon, I wanted silence. The rejected investment form sat inside a manila folder on the passenger seat. Someone had tried to add Grant to one of my investment accounts. The request had failed because the signature didn't match. No money had been taken. Nathan reminded me that didn't automatically prove Grant had personally signed anything. Someone from his office could have submitted it. It might eventually become a criminal matter, or it might never be possible to prove exactly who filled out the paperwork. But one thing was already certain. Someone close enough to my life knew the exact balance of that account. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for several minutes without getting out. At 58 years old, I had spent my entire career helping small businesses avoid payroll mistakes. I caught missing decimal points. I noticed duplicate invoices. I could usually tell when a number didn't belong. Yet somehow I had missed the biggest fraud in my own life. That hurt more than losing the money. The next few days settled into a miserable routine. Grant stayed in the guest room. We spoke only when absolutely necessary. He became strangely polite, not warm. Not apologetic, polite. He'd ask if I wanted coffee. He'd tell me dinner was in the refrigerator. He even folded the towels one evening. 2 weeks earlier, I probably would have thought those were signs he wanted to fix our marriage. Now they felt like negotiations. Every kindness came with invisible paperwork attached. Meanwhile, my body was beginning to protest. Hours spent reviewing statements made my lower back scream. My hands stiffened from sorting documents into folders. Some nights, I slept only 3 or 4 hours. One Thursday evening, I carried a bottle of laundry detergent downstairs. Halfway down, my sciatica caught me. The bottle slipped. Blue detergent spread across the basement floor. I stared at it. Then I slowly sat down on the bottom step and cried. Not because of the detergent, not even because of the money. I cried because I kept asking myself the same question. How could I have been this stupid? I hated that question. It echoed around my head for nearly 20 minutes. Finally, I reached for my phone. It was 1:47 in the morning. I called Carol. She answered on the 3rd ring. Evie? I'm sorry. What's wrong? I tried to laugh. Instead, I started crying again. Tell me the truth. About what? Did everyone see what Grant was except me? Carol didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle. No. It feels like they did. No. Then why didn't I? Because he wasn't pretending all the time. I frowned. What? He really was kind to you sometimes. That surprised me. Carol continued. People like Grant aren't monsters every minute of every day. If they were, nobody would stay. I wiped my face. You aren't foolish because someone lied to you. I feel foolish. I know. She let the silence settle. Then she added something I'll never forget. Being lonely after losing Paul wasn't a character flaw. That sentence stayed with me. Grant started telling a different story. Not to me, to everyone else. A week later, one of our neighbors stopped me while I was getting the mail. How are you feeling? I'm fine. You've just seemed overwhelmed lately. I looked at him. What makes you say that? He shifted uncomfortably. Grant mentioned you've been under a lot of stress. That was all he said. But I heard the rest. Later that afternoon, another acquaintance casually asked whether I planned to slow down at work. The following day, a client emailed to make sure I wasn't retiring. Little comments, small questions. None of them sounded alarming by themselves. Together, they formed a pattern. Grant wasn't simply defending himself. He was preparing people not to believe me. The idea made my stomach tighten. I had watched 2 close friends care for spouses with dementia. Memory loss terrified people our age. Grant knew that. He wasn't accusing me outright. He was planting doubt. A few days later, something happened that surprised me. Madison called. I'd like to talk. I think we've said enough. Please. There was something different in her voice. Less confidence, less anger, more uncertainty. We agreed to meet Saturday morning at the Panera in Broad Ripple. She was already there when I arrived. No makeup, hair pulled into a loose ponytail. An old Northgate University sweatshirt instead of designer clothes. She looked tired, very tired. She stood awkwardly when I approached. I already ordered your coffee. Thank you. We sat down. For almost a full minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, she sighed. I got a notice from school. I waited. If my account isn't brought current... She looked down. I can't register next semester. What did your father say? I've called him 12 times. 12? He says he's working on financing. And? I saw pictures online. She swallowed. He was at some networking reception. Not meeting lenders, not fixing tuition, networking. The realization had finally reached her. I took a careful sip of coffee. I'm sorry. She looked surprised. You are? I don't want your education destroyed. But you still won't pay. No, she nodded slowly. I figured. Another long silence. Then she reached into her backpack. I need to show you something. She placed several printed emails on the table. They're from Dad. I picked up the first page. My heart began beating faster. One message discussed my consulting business. Another referred to my Carmel house. Then I found the sentence that made my stomach turn. Once Evie signs the updated estate plan, we won't have to keep asking permission. I stared at it. What estate plan? Madison frowned. I thought you'd already agreed. I've never seen this. She blinked. What? I turned the pages toward her. This draft leaves Grant with broad control over my business if I die first. Her face lost color. He told me. What? He said you wanted everything to stay in the family. It is in the family. I pointed to the trust documents Nathan had copied for me. This house belongs to the Mercer Family Trust. She looked genuinely confused. I know, she leaned back. I thought Daniel was already taken care of. I shook my head. Grant told you that? She nodded. And he said I wouldn't need student loans because you wanted to help me. I looked out the window. Cars rolled through Broad Ripple as though nothing in the world had changed. Finally, I asked quietly, Why are you showing me this? She hesitated. Because yesterday... She stopped. What happened yesterday? He asked me to sign something. What? A statement saying you always knew where the money went. The words landed between us. You didn't sign it? No. Why not? She looked embarrassed. Because, she took a shaky breath. He wouldn't answer my calls until he needed something. For the first time since I'd met Madison, I saw not an entitled young woman, but a daughter realizing she had been useful before she had been loved. I felt sorry for her. That didn't erase what she'd done. You charged things to my credit card. I know. You insulted me. I know. You treated kindness like it was automatic. She nodded. I did. I folded the emails carefully. I appreciate you bringing these. She looked hopeful. Does that mean you're not mad anymore? I met her eyes. I'm still very angry. Her shoulders dropped. But, I continued, I'm willing to believe you can become someone different. She nodded once. I'd like that. Before we left, I said one more thing. You'll still need to repay the personal charges you made. I figured. No arguments? A tiny smile appeared. I was going to argue. What changed? She looked at the coffee cup in her hands. I think I'm done believing everything Dad says. That wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't redemption. It was simply the first honest sentence she'd spoken to me. 2 days later, Nathan called. I've spoken with Marlene Brooks, Grant's ex-wife. She kept everything, Nathan said. Everything? Emails, financial records, divorce filings. What did she say? She said Grant did almost exactly the same thing during their marriage. I closed my eyes. Nathan continued. She also confirmed something else. What? Several transfers you believed were paying Madison's education were actually being used to satisfy Grant's obligations from his divorce settlement. I leaned back in my chair. The money hadn't just disappeared. It had been keeping Grant's entire life from falling apart. Before I could answer, my office phone rang. The caller ID read, Arthur Sloan Hardware Supply. I answered. Arthur? His familiar gravelly voice came through the speaker. Evie, we need to talk. Of course. I think your husband made a mistake. What happened? He called me. My heart began pounding. He told me you're declining. I closed my eyes. Arthur continued quietly. And sweetheart, he paused. He left the whole thing on voicemail. Arthur Sloan almost never called me directly. He usually emailed payroll questions or left short voicemail messages that ended with, no rush. So when he said, we need to talk, I knew it wasn't about payroll. Are you free this afternoon? He asked. I can be. I'd rather not discuss this over the phone. His voice sounded calm, but there was something underneath it, not fear, disappointment. Arthur had owned Sloan Hardware Supply for more than 40 years. He'd buried his wife after a long fight with Alzheimer's disease, survived bypass surgery, and still insisted on walking through his warehouse every Tuesday morning with a portable oxygen tank instead of riding the golf cart his employees begged him to use. He wasn't easily rattled. If Grant had upset Arthur, Grant had made a very serious mistake. Arthur's office sat just east of downtown Indianapolis. When I arrived, he was already waiting with 2 cups of coffee. I remembered, he said with a faint smile. 1 cream. You always do. He lowered himself into his chair slowly, adjusting the oxygen tubing beneath his nose. I owe you an apology. For what? I almost believed him. I felt my stomach tighten. What exactly did Grant tell you? Arthur reached for his phone. He said he was calling as a friend. He pressed play. Grant's voice filled the office. Arthur, I don't want to alarm you, but Evie's been under a tremendous amount of stress. She's getting forgetful. Nothing dangerous yet, but I thought you deserved a heads up before payroll season gets busy. You may want to think about transitioning to someone else before things become complicated. The message ended. Arthur looked at me. I've known you 15 years. I couldn't speak. I've watched you catch payroll errors that saved me thousands of dollars. I nodded. You've corrected my tax accountant twice. I remember. You once called me from a hospital waiting room because you noticed one employee's overtime looked wrong. I laughed weakly. My mother was getting her knee replaced. And you still noticed. He leaned forward. My Eleanor had dementia. The room became very quiet. I know. No, sweetheart. His voice softened. You don't. He rested both hands on his cane. I know what early dementia looks like. He paused. You don't have it. The words broke something inside me. Not because I had truly believed I was losing my memory, because I suddenly realized how many people Grant had probably told. How many conversations had started with, I'm worried about Evie. Arthur slid a folder across the desk. That's a copy of the voicemail. You're giving this to me? You're my payroll manager. He smiled sadly. And my friend. Nathan listened to the recording twice, then a third time. Finally, he removed his glasses. This is better than I expected. I thought you'd be furious. I am. He folded his hands. But I'm also practical. What do you mean? The voicemail doesn't prove fraud. I know. It doesn't prove forgery. I know. But it does establish a pattern. He pointed toward my notebook. Grant isn't simply defending himself. He's trying to destroy my credibility. Nathan nodded. And your business. He explained everything carefully. The rejected investment authorization was still under review by the investment company's fraud department. I had already filed a police report, so there would be an official record. Whether investigators could ever prove who physically completed or submitted the paperwork remained uncertain. Nathan refused to promise an arrest. That isn't how the real world works. Oddly enough, hearing that reassured me. He wasn't selling revenge. He was helping me rebuild my life. The stronger case, he continued, is civil. He listed everything on a yellow legal pad. Your separate funds entered Grant's business after misleading explanations. He represented educational expenses that weren't educational expenses. He attempted to damage your professional reputation. We have documentary evidence. We have witnesses. We have banking records. He looked up. That's enough to change your future. Not necessarily Grant's, mine. A week later, I filed for legal separation. Nathan also requested temporary financial restraints, a forensic accounting, preservation of electronic records, and exclusive control over my consulting business. Signing the paperwork felt strangely ordinary. No dramatic music, no shaking hands, just a blue pen attached to the attorney's conference table. 22 months of marriage reduced to several signatures. When I finished, Nathan quietly slid a tissue box toward me. I hadn't realized I was crying. Grant changed almost overnight. The yelling disappeared. Instead, flowers appeared on the kitchen counter. He cooked chicken parmesan one evening. Another night, he warmed a towel in the dryer because he knew the heat helped my hands. You've been working too hard, he said gently. I can manage. You shouldn't have to. For a few dangerous days, I wanted to believe him. Loneliness does strange things after 50. It whispers. It reminds you how quiet the house becomes after dinner, how much easier it is to forgive than to start over. One evening, we actually laughed together while watching an old episode of Frasier. For 30 minutes, everything felt almost normal. Then he reached into his briefcase. I need your help with something. He placed several documents on the kitchen table. Commercial refinancing paperwork. The collateral? My house. Our house, he corrected. No. Evie, my house. It'll only be temporary. How temporary? Until this development closes. I looked at the projected loan amount. It would pay off business debt. It would also cover Madison's overdue tuition. You planned this. What? The dinner. The apology. The flowers. His face hardened just enough. You're being cynical. No. I closed the folder. You were being patient. He sighed dramatically. I thought we were finally healing. You thought I was finally signing. Then he crossed a line I never expected. Paul would have helped. The room went completely silent. Paul, my first husband, The man I'd buried after 34 years of marriage. Grant actually used his name. I doubt Paul would have let his family fall apart over money. I stood so quickly my chair scraped across the hardwood floor. Do not. He blinked. Evie, do not use my husband's name to sell me your debt. I picked up the bouquet sitting beside the sink. The roses he'd brought me that morning. Without thinking, I dropped them into the trash. For 1 second, I saw genuine surprise on his face. Not because I'd thrown away flowers, because I'd stopped playing the role he'd written for me. That night, Daniel came over. He didn't lecture me. He didn't remind me that he'd warned me. He simply replaced the broken latch on my back gate. Afterward, we sat on the back porch. I owe you an apology, I said. You don't. I do, he smiled. I wasn't happy to be right. I know. I was scared. I looked at him. Of what? That someone would hurt you. I stared into the backyard. I kept thinking everyone must believe I'm an idiot. Daniel shook his head. No. Then what? I think they believe exactly what I believe. And what's that? He looked at me for a long moment. You missed being loved. I covered my eyes. He reached over and squeezed my shoulder. That isn't the same thing as being stupid. 3 days later, Nathan called again. The Central Indiana Business Leadership Award luncheon is next Friday. I remembered. Grant had been talking about it for months. He still expects you to attend. I know. He also told the organizers you've had a stressful few weeks, but you're eager to support him publicly. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. He wants me standing beside him. He wants your credibility standing beside him. Nathan paused. I have an idea. We met that afternoon. His advice surprised me. You're not going there to destroy him. I'm not? No. He leaned across his desk. You're going there to stop protecting him. There was a difference, a very important one. The following Tuesday morning, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Madison stood there holding a small suitcase. Her eyes were red from crying. My dad changed the locks, she whispered. He said if I was choosing you, I could live with the consequences. I looked at the suitcase, then back at her. No, I said quietly. You're finally living with his. When people imagine revenge, they usually picture shouting, a dramatic speech, someone getting slapped, someone getting arrested. Real life almost never works that way. Sometimes revenge is simply refusing to stand where someone expects you to stand. That Friday morning, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, fastening a pair of pearl earrings Paul had given me on our 25th anniversary. My fingers ached. Arthritis had a way of reminding me that even ordinary tasks took longer than they used to. Behind me, Madison stood awkwardly in the hallway. You don't have to go, she said. Yes, I answered. I kind of wish you wouldn't. I smiled faintly. So do I. Daniel drove me to the Meridian Grand Hotel downtown. Nathan had insisted. No surprises, he'd said. Don't arrive alone. When we reached the entrance, Daniel turned off the engine. You nervous? I laughed quietly. I've been nervous for 3 weeks. He reached over and squeezed my hand. No matter what happens in there, he paused. I'm proud of you. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear that. The ballroom looked exactly like every business luncheon I'd ever attended. Round tables, white tablecloths, coffee cups, tiny cheesecakes waiting for dessert. About 200 people filled the room. Bankers, business owners, accountants, insurance agents, people who had trusted me with payroll records for years. Grant was already standing near the stage shaking hands. When he saw me, he smiled immediately. There was the charming businessman everyone admired. He walked over, kissed my cheek for the photographers, and whispered, I knew you'd come. I said I would. He smiled wider. I told everyone you've had a difficult few weeks. I'm aware. He adjusted his tie. Let's keep today positive. Then, without changing his pleasant expression, he leaned closer. Smile. I looked directly into his eyes. Why? So everyone knows you overreacted. For just a moment. I almost walked away. Not because I was afraid of him, because I was tired of explaining, tired of paperwork, tired of wondering whether people believed me. Then I remembered something my mother had said while we were replacing batteries in her television remote a few nights earlier. "You don't have to prove you're brave every day." She had smiled. "You just have to stop volunteering for the same humiliation." I walked toward the stage. The program began exactly on schedule. Announcements, sponsors, scholarships, community awards. Finally, the master of ceremonies smiled toward me. "Mrs. Holloway has kindly agreed to introduce this year's Business Leadership Award recipient." Applause. I walked to the podium. For a second, I looked across the room. I recognized dozens of faces. People I'd worked beside for years, people who trusted me with payroll taxes, retirement deductions, and employee records. Then I began. Marriage has an interesting way of blending reputations. The room became quiet. For nearly 2 years, many people assumed that because I stood beside my husband, I approved of every business decision he made. I paused. I've realized that's no longer true. No one moved. I continued calmly. My husband publicly informed me that I had no parental role in helping raise his adult daughter. Grant shifted in his chair. I accepted that boundary. I stopped voluntarily paying expenses that belonged to her parents. Several people exchanged confused glances. Afterward, I learned that money I believed was supporting educational expenses had also been directed elsewhere. Grant stood. "Evie," I raised one hand. "I'm almost finished." The room was so quiet I could hear silverware touching china somewhere near the back. I also discovered an unauthorized request involving one of my investment accounts. I chose every word carefully. The matter has been reported and remains under review. I did not accuse him of forgery. Nathan had been very clear. Facts. Only facts. I've also filed for legal separation and requested a forensic accounting. Grant reached the stage. "That's enough." I looked at him. "No." Then I said the sentence I'd practiced all week. "I came today because my presence has been used as proof that everything in our marriage and our finances is perfectly normal." I looked around the ballroom. It isn't. I stepped away from the microphone. "I'm no longer willing to lend my name to that story." I returned toward my chair. The applause never came, neither did the outrage. Just silence. Grant grabbed the microphone. "I'm sorry," he said with an embarrassed laugh. "My wife has been under tremendous emotional stress." He smiled sympathetically toward the audience. "Many of you know her mother has experienced health issues." My jaw tightened. Sometimes family situations become overwhelming. He sighed dramatically. "We've been trying to handle this privately." He looked directly at me. "Unfortunately, confusion sometimes looks like certainty." Several people looked uncertain. For one awful moment, I thought it had worked. The master of ceremonies awkwardly suggested everyone continue lunch while the program paused. Grant walked back toward me. "I told you," he smiled. "You've embarrassed yourself." Then a chair scraped across the ballroom. Arthur Sloan slowly stood. The room recognized him immediately. Everyone in local business knew Arthur. He didn't hurry, didn't raise his voice, didn't ask for the microphone. He simply held up his cell phone. "I received a voicemail Tuesday morning." Grant froze. Arthur looked around the room. "My late wife spent 7 years living with Alzheimer's disease." His voice remained calm. "I don't appreciate people borrowing that tragedy because they don't like being questioned." He pressed play. Grant's voice carried clearly across the nearest tables. "Arthur, Evie's getting forgetful. You may want to think about transitioning your payroll before things become complicated." The recording lasted less than 20 seconds. It didn't need to be longer. People sitting nearby heard every word. Those farther away saw the expressions on everyone else's faces. The whispers spread through the ballroom faster than any loudspeaker ever could. Arthur slipped his phone back into his pocket. Then he looked directly at Grant. "I've trusted that woman with my payroll for 15 years. He paused. "I trust her today." He sat down. Grant tried to laugh. Arthur misunderstood. No. Everyone turned. Madison had stood. She was trembling. I misunderstood. She held several printed emails. My father told me Evie had agreed to change her estate plan. She swallowed. He told me her business, her house, would eventually belong to our family. She looked at me. She never agreed. Grant stared at his daughter. What are you doing? Telling the truth. I paid for everything you have. Madison's eyes filled with tears. No, she shook her head slowly. She did. The room fell silent again. No one applauded, no one cheered. Real life doesn't sound like movies. It sounds like people quietly realizing they've been lied to. The president of the Business Association walked onto the stage. In light of information brought forward today, he said carefully, the board will postpone today's Business Leadership Award pending further review. That was all. No public condemnation, no dramatic verdict, just consequences beginning. Grant looked around the ballroom. Several people avoided his eyes. One lender quietly left. A longtime client who usually greeted him with a handshake walked past without stopping. Another approached me instead. Evie, he said softly, are our payroll records secure? Yes. They always have been. He nodded. I thought so. The divorce took almost 11 months. A forensic accountant traced a large portion of my money into Grant's struggling development company. Some had covered legitimate household expenses. Much of it had not. The investigation into the investment paperwork continued for quite a while. Ultimately, investigators could not prove beyond question who physically prepared or submitted the rejected authorization, although it had originated from an email account connected to Grant's office. Faced with civil discovery, Grant eventually agreed to a financial settlement. I recovered part of my savings. Not all of it. Attorney fees consumed far more than I'd hoped. Justice is expensive. Grant's largest development collapsed within the year. He sold the Lexus. He moved into a modest apartment. Madison took a semester away from Northgate University. She moved in with her mother. She worked in the campus bookstore, took out student loans, and signed a repayment agreement for the personal charges she'd made on my credit card. Once a month, we met for coffee. At first, we mostly discussed receipts and budgets. Months later, she quietly said something I'd waited a long time to hear. I treated your kindness like proof you were weak, I smiled. No. It was proof I trusted the wrong person. She nodded. I won't make that mistake again. Neither would I. Daniel helped me repaint the guest room. I finally replaced the old furnace I'd postponed repairing. My physical therapist joked that my back seemed to improve once I stopped carrying everyone else's problems. She wasn't entirely wrong. A few months later, I took my mother away for a quiet weekend. We walked slowly through the hotel lobby. She rubbed her knee. I rubbed my hands. She smiled. Getting older hurts in places you didn't know existed. I laughed. At least now I'm only paying for my own aches. She squeezed my arm. That's progress. It was. Looking back now, I don't think the best part of my story was watching Grant lose an award, or a business deal, or even a marriage. The best part was realizing that kindness doesn't require endless sacrifice, and love doesn't require surrendering your judgment. If you've ever had someone mistake your generosity for an obligation, I hope you remember this. Setting a boundary may cost you a relationship, but it can save your self-respect. And sometimes that's the beginning of a better life.